He found it while trawling in the English Channel in 1987. It later occurred to him that it looked like the type of plane that Glenn Miller went in. They said it was weather when Glenn Miller's plane went missing in 1944. However, new secret papers show a different picture. 3 times, the pilot tried to go back. Radio waves were cut off in the middle of a sentence. The strangest part comes next. A fisherman recently found pieces of metal that don't belong to any known planes from that time. This is finally the truth about why Miller died, after 80 years of lies and cover-ups. It wasn't the weather. It wasn't a problem with the machinery. The truth is a lot worse. Glenn Miller was born in Clarinda, Iowa, on March 1, 1904. In that small town, life moved slowly and money never went far enough. He grew up in a strict Methodist home with little to no music, thanks to Mattie Lou and Louis Miller. But inside him, something leaned toward sound. His father gave him a mandolin when he was 10 years old. But Glenn wanted something that would be easy for him to carry when the family moved to different small places, so he traded it for a cornet. By 1915, when the family had moved to Missouri, that one choice had changed everything. In order to pay for his first trombone, he joined the neighborhood orchestra and milked cows and mixed concrete. He used that horn as a guide. He learned discipline and a kind of hunger that never left him in those quiet farm fields and dusty barns. After a few years, in 1918, the family moved again, this time to Fort Morgan, Colorado. Glenn bought a used trombone for $5 at a junk shop when he was 14 years old. The boy who had almost nothing did something brave, but it fired him up. Every night, he practiced, sometimes in the family barn until the stars went out, while his dad sold anything he could across the area to keep the family going. Glenn was only interested in math and Latin in school. But music had an effect on him that no school could. He played first trombone in the school band by 1921. When it was time for him to graduate, he skipped the celebration right away and went to Denver to join the Boyd Center's Wolverine Band. He played in smoky, loud rooms for $15 a week. There was nothing fancy about it, but it showed him what real life in music was like, and he didn't run away from it. He got closer. Glenn began going to the University of Colorado in January 1923. He became a member of Sigma Nu and tried to go the normal route toward becoming a civil engineer. Glenn, on the other hand, played gigs at the Boulder Opera House to make extra money while his peers studied acids and bases. His scores dropped a lot. His need for music didn't change. Then, in March 1924, Orville Bond's La Chroma Club band in Denver made him an offer for $125 a month. He took it. People were shocked by him. For them, music was just a hobby, not a job. Glenn quit college after only one term and sold his trombone to pay for his plane ticket. At the time, that choice seemed risky, but it was the start of his real climb. In 1926, he moved to Los Angeles and joined Ben Pollack's band. Having dreams and sharing rooms with artists who would go on to become big stars. Up until Jack Teagarden came in 1928, Glenn played most of the trombone solos for a while. When Teagarden showed up, it changed the order, and Glenn had to make plans. People are often forced to go in new directions after being turned down, and Glenn learned something important. He was good at creating sounds in ways that other people hadn't heard before. He put together music for Red Nichols, the Dorsey Brothers, Benny Goodman, and Ray Noble during the hard times of the Great Depression. He didn't learn the secret heartbeat of jazz on stages, but by working hard on paper and ink for long nights. Along the way, he played in a lot of speakeasies from the time of Prohibition. These were dangerous places with lots of smoke where fights could start over a change in the beat. People who were breaking the law gave him good tips, but there was always chaos in the room. He learned something from seeing all that chaos. Music needed a framework. It had to be exact. Something that knew both the beauty and the danger of it was needed to lead it. Glenn saw how music could bring people together for a short time, no matter who they were. The clear, clean sound that would later be heard in songs like Moonlight Serenade and In the Mood came from those nights. Glenn moved to New York City when he was 24 years old, but he didn't have much money and had big dreams. He tried out for more than 50 bands and slept on friends' beds for months. For $20 a week, he did background music for radio shows like The Great White Way. He often walked miles across the city at night because he didn't have enough money for a subway ticket. He later said that he thought he was about to fall. He sometimes slept on benches. To save power, he wrote the music by candlelight. He kept going even though all of his clothes fit in one bag. And one job at a time, artists began to pay attention to him. He had steady session work for radio and studio bands by 1929. The city that almost ate him up turned out to be the place that made him stronger. Around the same time, on October 6, 1928, Glenn married Helen Berger in a small, private wedding at the church next door. There was no honeymoon. He left the next day to go on a cross-country tour with Smith Values Band. A lot of people knew he smoked, about 3 packs a day. From 1930 on, it hurt him a lot. During practices, bandmates heard the coughs and pauses where the singers were out of breath. Docs told him not to, but Glenn said the cigarettes kept him awake on long car trips. It was hard to get money. A lot of medical bills came in. It was hard to pay rent. Still, he kept going with the same steady resolve he had shown since he was a kid. He worked as an arranger for the Dorsey Brothers Orchestra in 1934. When he used clarinets and saxophones together as reed bass doubling, it changed the whole sound of the instruments. It made the band more well-known, but it also brought problems. Toy Dorsey, who had a bad attitude, often fought with Glenn. A disagreement over solo billing turned into a fistfight at one Chicago show. Glenn left for good after that. The breakup cost him money, but it gave him more freedom to be artistic. Later, Tommy used Glenn's sound for a different band, which made him very angry. Though Glenn stayed busy as a planner. What he wrote was more important than anything else, even when he was fighting. Glenn led Ray Noble's American band for a short time in 1935. They had times when things went well. Especially when there are designs like Cherokee. But bad management stopped them in their tracks. Following the breakup of the band, Glenn owed $2,000, which is more than $40,000 today. He loaned his trumpet to pay the rent. That moment hurt a lot. He said it felt like rock bottom later. To get his credit back, he did any job arranging things he could find until he paid off all of his bills. By 1937, that hard stretch made him think in a certain way. He needed his own band if he wanted to be stable. During 1936, Glenn worked as a freelancer for NBC Radio, writing charts for Paul Whiteman that went straight to the top of the Billboard lists. But the business world had its own walls. Everything was changed by segregation. Integrated bands were not allowed to play at big events. And white gatekeepers kept many black artists from getting chances. Glenn pushed back in a quiet way. He hired black players for sessions as often as he could and worked behind the scenes to help mixed groups. Even though there were real threats, he rarely talked about it in public, but his work helped move things in the right direction. Glenn put together his first group and signed with Brunswick Records in 1937. He reserved the Mecca Ballroom in Milwaukee in the hopes of making a big break. Instead, the band broke up after 6 months. Their weak vocals, bad bookings, constant problems at venues, and mounting bills caused them to break up. Glenn could not even pay his players after their last show at the Ritz Ballroom in Bridgeport in January 1938. He owed almost $10,000. His dad helped out to help pay off some bills. Glenn was upset. After that, he went up to Benny Goodman and asked him a simple question. "What do you do? How do you make it?" He got the answer by not giving up. He got back together in March 1938 and put together a tighter 15-piece band. Tex Bennick and Marion Hutton were hired by him. They worked on perfecting what would become the Glenn Miller sound for 12 hours a day in a studio he rented in Harlem. Leading clarinet saxophones that are smooth, warm, and easy to recognize in a second. By May 1939, they had a regular spot at the Glen Island Casino, and their music was played on radio stations all over the country. All of a sudden, everyone was eager to hear this new sound. When they first performed at the Meadowbrook Ballroom on April 25, 1939, things didn't go as planned. The strange designs were laughed at by the crowds. Everything changed when Moonlight Serenade became their song. It was like overnight, attendance tripled. Soon after, the band was touring the Midwest in the winter of 1939 in an old, broken-down bus. They were tired and had low mood. Things got really crazy in Pittsburgh after that. Fans rushed the stage and demanded more songs. It was a mess. It was exciting. And it showed that the band was here. Later that year, RCA Victor gave Glenn a great deal that paid him $1,500 per 78 revolutions per minute record plus a cut of the income. He made the song In the Mood on August 1, 1939. The executives wanted words to be added. Glenn said no. It was just the song for him. It went straight to number 1 and stayed there for 30 weeks. The very first gold record ever given was to Glenn for Chattanooga Choo Choo in February 1942. In just 9 months, it had sold over 1.2 million copies. RCA gave a gold-painted 78 revolutions per minute disc to Chesterfield to play during a show. For big buyers, they even had engraved train models, which made sales even better. At the same time, Glenn had trouble paying his bills because he was fighting with ASCAP over royalties. That almost put him out of business. Glenn played at Madison Square Garden in front of 18,000 people on October 27, 1942. Fireworks went off in the sky. Lights were shining on the stage. Someone had messed up his trumpet valve backstage, though. Glenn and his team fixed it right before the show started. There was more of the show. That kind of thing showed how much pressure was behind the smooth sound. Glenn was in Sun Valley Serenade in 1941, which was a Hollywood movie with a deal. More than 100 dancers took part in the Chattanooga Choo Choo song. There was a fight between Glenn and director H. Bruce Humberstone over the arrangement of the music. Glenn wanted certain cuts. The director wanted scenes to be shorter. The fights got so bad that Glenn left the set for a short time. He fought hard to protect his songs even in movies. By 1942, Glenn was making about $750,000 a year from shows and endorsements, such as a big deal with Camel cigarettes. Even though he was rich, the guilt he felt at home didn't go away. He told Helen many times that he felt bad that he missed Stephen's first steps. From 1940 to 1942, Moonlight Serenade aired once a week on CBS, and about 40 million people tuned in. It made the country feel better during a scary time, but success came with dark sides. In 1941, Jimmy Dorsey sued for plagiarism, saying that the arrangements were too close. Glenn settled out of court for about $5,000 to stay out of trouble. Glenn Miller had a lot of fame. But behind that light, he fought fights that almost no one saw. It all began quietly in 1940, when he got chronic sinusitis from touring so much through dusty rooms and smoky clubs that he could never really rest. Chicago doctors did something that was out of the ordinary at the time. An experimental oxygen medicine that is mostly for people in the military. He was on his back for weeks. As one show after another was canceled, he sat in a small, dark room and breathed through masks. There were rumors going around the business world, but he didn't tell anyone the truth. Helen and a few other band members were the only ones who knew why he had disappeared so quickly. He pushed himself to go back on stage before he was fully healed because he didn't want to let the crowd down. He hid how tired he was behind a smile that got tighter every night while the crowds cheered. In 1942, he started to feel another stress in his life. With every hit, his orchestra was getting bigger, which made him a legend of the time. Things were shaking at home, though. Helen was putting money into war bonds to protect her family's future and hoped that they would stay safe in these difficult times. Glenn, on the other hand, liked going to racetracks. He lost $50,000 all at once at Saratoga. Today, that one moment is worth almost $1 million, and Helen felt it very deeply. While they were alone, they fought so loudly that bandmates in rooms close could hear that something important had happened. There had been times when he came back from a trip with no money, and each time he felt bad about it. Helen's gentle rules have saved them more than once. After he went missing in 1944, her smart decisions were the only thing that kept the family together. Adding Stephen to their family brought happiness in 1943. But even that happiness had dark sides. Later, Glenn's friends said that he would drink up to a quart of whiskey in a week, especially on nights when the band wasn't playing. Sober. Was kind and warm, and he loved his kids very much. After drinking, though, he might act in strange ways. Helen found bottles hidden in his bag during a 1944 surprise visit. The news hurt her more than any loss from gaming ever had. To help him, she did everything she could think of, like asking people to watch him and making small changes, hoping he would get himself together. But the habit kept coming back, and it was hard on the family, even though the press made him look like a devoted, perfect family man. Later that same year, the Millers adopted Johnny D and celebrated with a quiet picnic in the garden, away from the reporters. The truth is that Glenn felt bad even in that happy moment. He wrote while he was on the road that he felt like he was losing his kids' youth while building an empire. He knew Helen was mostly taking care of them by herself. He kept getting farther away from tour life. There were also rumors about the band. During long trips, there are rumors about Glenn and female fans. Even though none of it was proven, the rumors made things worse. He seemed torn in his letters. A man tries to find a balance between love and desire, between success and fear. Applause with sadness. His own words told the truth more than any interview ever could. Another strange weight pressed on him inside the business. Some promoters and reviewers said anti-Semitic things about his music, even though he led a Protestant band. A producer called off a big show in 1941 because the band's sound was too Jewish. At the time, it was a mean word for anyone who used different beats or a full dance sound. Glenn was shocked and mad. Instead of fighting loudly, he pushed quietly, standing up for musicians that other people didn't care about and insisting on contracts that covered everyone on his team. Even though the bias never went away completely, the little things he did changed what fairness meant in his part of the business. His body began sending stronger signs in 1943. Once he passed out at the Hollywood Bowl, he found out he had early asthma from smoking a lot for 20 years. They told him to stop right away. He tried many times but failed. When he was stressed, he would smoke again, and he would sometimes smoke non-stop during long practices. Band members began to notice that he was out of breath after doing easy things in late 1944. His friends said he tried patches, groups, and anything else he could get his hands on. But nothing stayed put. The people didn't know about the drop. Few people knew how quickly he was going away. Then the moment that shocked everyone in the music business. In October 1942, Glenn Miller joined the U.S. Army Air Forces at Maxwell Field. He was at the height of his fame at the time. He took a job as a captain and gave all the money from the sale of his orchestra to the war effort, which was about $100,000. Fans were shocked. Some people begged the government to put off his service. But Glenn had already sent General Charles Young a 3-page letter with a lot of information about how he wanted to update military music. The Army Air Forces took him in, and all of a sudden, the most popular musician in the country was putting on a uniform and getting ready for something very different from the fame he was used to. After moving to Yale University in 1943, he put together what would become the biggest and most skilled military band ever. He chose more than 50 artists, mixing classical skills with jazz and swing. Some cops didn't like the music he picked because they thought it was too commercial, but Glenn stuck to his guns. His band played songs like American Patrol, In the Mood, and others that were meant to boost mood because he thought that music could do that more quickly than words. They played in and aired more than 800 concerts, reaching millions of people and changing the way music was used during the war. The band went on tour of U.S. bases that same year. There was chaos at times when a 16-piece group played for more than 500,000 soldiers. At Fort Dix, the crowd rushed forward as soon as Glenn got excited. A lot of GIs rushed the stage, trying to get a better spot. They were pushed back by military cops who rushed in. Even though it was a mess, it showed how strong his music could be. A simple tune could instantly move a large group of people. By 1944, he was a major and was hosting the BBC show I Sustained the Wings from London once a week. Every week, more than 8 million people tuned in. While writing to his family, he told them a different story. He was tired from gas rations, bombings, air raid sirens, not being able to sleep, and long practices. He put on a strong front for his men, even though the stress made each day feel worse than the last. People all over the world still found comfort in the reports, and they seemed real because Glenn was in the same war as the ones they were hearing about. In the same year, he was able to briefly see his family again through telegrams that promised Johnny a pony when the war was over. But the truth was a lot worse. His cough got worse. His health was getting worse. During the war, everything was hidden. Helen had no idea how weak he had become. He worked hard anyway because he didn't want to let the troops down. His letters got a little thinner, almost forced. As they became tired. He came to England in June 1944 to get ready for the European trip. General Dwight D. Eisenhower asked him over the phone at Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force to play Little Brown Jug at Sheoff events. The request made Glenn even more well-known. His group quickly rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel outfit. They felt a little stronger everywhere they went. Getting to hear his songs. Then it was December 15, 1944. At RAF Twinwood Farm, Glenn Miller got on a small UC-64 Norseman. At 1:37 in the afternoon, the plane took off for Paris. Flight officer John Morgan was in charge of it. He was sitting next to Norman Bessel from La Torre-Kohler. It was freezing fog that day, and you could only see about 100 yards ahead. The wings were already getting cold. They were aware of the danger, but they had to get to Paris for an important Christmas show, so they went anyway. Noreen was never meant to go on long water trips when it was very cold. After going up to 4,000 feet, the temperature dropped to -10 degrees Celsius in a carburetor freezing zone. The engine started to break down when ice formed in the fuel lines. Single-engine planes often had to deal with this threat, and this time there was no way out. Heavy headwinds pushed the plane northeast, and it fell into a stretch of air that was thick with freezing wetness. The engines made a lot of noise and then stopped working. At more than 200 miles per hour, the Norseman crashed into the English Channel and broke into many pieces near Le Tréport. There was no call for help. The wreckage sank into 300 feet of water and was spread out over a large area. Rescue efforts had to be put on hold because of the Battle of the Bulge. There was never any evidence found. Not a seat, a piece of clothes, or an engine part. It turned into one of the most disturbing disappearances of the war. Then crazy ideas came up. It began in December 1944. And Glenn Miller was last seen over the English Channel. Then there was silence for a while, and then a strange story began to spread through German media. Going too far, Goebbels said Miller never crashed at all and died in a Paris brothel. The rumor said that he went to the red light area, hung out with prostitutes, and then had a heart attack and passed out. There were even hints of a sexual disease in some papers. It was meant to hurt. The Allies were supposed to look weak. It was a simple idea. If their favorite bandleader could give in to temptation, then maybe none of them were as good as they said they were. But the story was quickly disproved when real proof was shown. On December 15, several people saw Miller get on the plane, and military records showed that his flight never made it to Paris. The story went on, though. Since shocking lies cast long shadows, they are especially dangerous during war. Another idea said Miller died when RAF Lancaster bombers dropped their old bombs on his plane by accident that same day. It sounded really exciting. A whole group of bombers was coming back from a mission and dropping their loads over the English Channel. There were more than 130 Lancasters in the sky. People thought that Miller's little Norseman would slip right under them. RAF logs, on the other hand, showed something different. A little over 90 minutes before his plane got there, the bombs were done with their throw-off runs. No one on the crew ever said they saw a small plane. There was never an incident record. Dennis Sprague, a historian, looked over thousands of pages and made sure there was no conflict. Some people were excited about the idea, but the records didn't make room for it. As time went on, stories got even stranger. One of them said Miller worked for Eisenhower behind his back. The idea was that he was meant to meet with Nazi leaders in Switzerland and talk about a peace deal. Then something went wrong, and they took him away. It spread around the world in the 1950s. It was used in several books, which made it sound exciting. But neither Schaffheil's nor Eisenhower's staff notes ever mentioned such a task. On December 15, Miller was seen getting on the plane with Norm Bessel. The paperwork all led to one simple goal. He was going to Paris to put on shows for the troops. Many people were interested in the idea of a secret mission, but the facts never added up. The story got even stranger when magazines said Miller faked his own death and ran off to Brazil with Nazi gold in the 1960s. They showed a passport from a guy who looked like him and went by the name Herbert Zimpel that was found in South America. It made us spark for a moment. It made people want to believe it because secrets are more fun when they're still open. But in 2000, DNA tests showed that Miller's body parts found in the Zimpel grave did not belong to him. That was all it took to destroy the dream. Historians threw it out because there was no solid proof that Miller was anywhere near Brazil. Another story said that the secret had something to do with the Chicago mob. It said Miller was connected to thieves before the war, and something went wrong. He might have turned down a payment. He might have upset the wrong person. The idea came from the fact that many bars had shady owners and musicians often ran into criminals. But FBI records didn't show anything. Not a single danger. Not a single word about fear from a gang. So the idea stayed a dramatic story with no real meaning. Some people even tried to use Miller's letters as hints. In 1944, he wrote to his brother Herb and told him that he had lost weight and was having trouble breathing. From that, an idea grew that he got on the plane on purpose to kill himself. It was a terrible thought, but there was no autopsy because there was no body. An official report said it was freezing outside and there were technical problems. Even though he did have health problems, there was no sign that he wanted to die that day. This was done in secret by the U.S. Army in December 1945, a year after the crash. The UC-64 Norseman probably got frozen, they found. In the very cold air, the wings froze and the fuel lines got clogged. It's likely that the plane lost power very quickly. Everyone on board died right away. But the Army kept the results secret. In times of war, they were afraid that letting them go would bring down confidence. These facts were kept secret for over 60 years. Before the truth came out in 2010, Dennis Sprague had to fight FOIA requests and look through Maxwell Air Force Base's records. Historians were shocked by the find because it showed how easy it was for a government to hide facts in the name of keeping things stable. In 1997, there was even more chaos. When Udo Olfkott wrote that Miller had died in a brothel in Paris. In his book, he said there were secret papers and pictures of Miller in inappropriate situations. When people saw them, they gasped. They were real. But in 2005, a libel case showed that they were fake Nazi propaganda pieces made decades before to hurt people in the Allies. Olfkott lied and used fakes without meaning to. But the damage was already done. The story affected public opinion and hurt Miller's image for almost 10 years. He dug up a part of the trench in 2012 and found a Pratt & Whitney R1340 engine head with the number 447-0285 on it. The Norseman Miller made matched it. It looked like the puzzle would finally be solved for a moment, but the U.S. Air Force threw the piece away as useless trash. Researchers were upset that they wouldn't give up the cylinder, which was one of the few bits that could be directly linked to Miller's flight. People always think there is something behind the door when officials close it too quickly, and this rejection made conspiracy ideas even stronger. Then, in 2014, something came back to life that had been gone for decades. Write down Francis Gaffney's statement. One last thing he said was that he saw a small plane fighting in fog with ice on its wings. His statement was very important. However, the original paper was lost for many years until Dennis Sprague found it in the archives. People thought someone might have tried to hide such an important message because it hadn't been made in a long time. The weather and mechanical failure explanation was backed by Gaffney's story. But the way the statement was added and removed from the records made people wonder about things they shouldn't have. In 2025, RAF logs that had just been made public added another layer. They showed that the channel was hit hard on December 15, 1944. It was an ideal storm, with waves of about 12 inches and temperatures as low as -15 degrees Celsius. The Army's early results were backed up by the logs. But then there was a surprise. The whole day's logbook for pilot John Morgan was crossed out. It has no notes, entries, or anything else. People were scared by the silence. Someone took out all the information from his records that should have held the last hints. Now that the weather report was clear and the pilot notes were gone, the puzzle felt like it was getting closer to the truth while also being further from being solved. Miller's family went through a different kind of pain while these stories spread. Every year, more than 50 fake calls were made to his wife Helen. Some said he was still living. They acted like they knew things. Even after decades, the calls kept coming, and by 1966, she had stopped being public. Their son Stephen carried the wounds into the 1970s. He told a therapist that the calls and letters left him badly scarred. Every lie was like cutting myself again. What took place at 2:15 p.m. on December 15, 1944, is still the tragedy's heart. Miller got on the Norseman for a quick trip from England to Paris. The temperature was well below freezing, with 50 degrees 20 minutes north of where I was and 0 degrees 30 minutes east. The fuel lines and engine got icy. The engine stopped working. The plane fell almost 4,000 feet in 20 seconds. Everyone died right away from the crash. There was no enemy fire or damage, it was just cold and the planes were weak. After many years, in 2018, a retired trawlerman named Mr. Fisher found a piece of metal tube while fishing about 15 miles from where the crash was thought to have happened. Tests showed that the metal belonged to a Norseman in particular. It matched details about how that type of airplane was made that were unique. The find backed up the idea that the plane did indeed land somewhere in that part of the river. Still, most of the damage is still hidden by deep water and strong currents. There were also people involved in the tragedy. Even though the pilot, John Morgan, told the Turk-Calder Norman Basile that the weather was bad, he still pushed for the flight. Morgan was ready to wait. Basile told them they had to leave. His drive and desire to get Miller's band moving faster led him to make a choice that he should not have. Miller even tried to get approval from a higher level, but Basile went ahead with his plan anyway. He was later found to have directly caused the fatal situation by what he did. Morgan may have lived through the first crash. In his 26 years, he had done a lot. The UC-64A Norseman wasn't made to fly in the dark over cold weather, though. The water in the channel was about 2 degrees Celsius when the plane hit it. Even strong people lose consciousness in minutes in water that cold. Within half an hour, death comes next. We can't know for sure when each life ended until bodies are found. But the cold makes it very clear what time it is. They were quickly taken by the sea, before anyone could get to them.